The phone rang at 2:47 a.m., jolting me awake like a cattle prod to the spine. In 23 years of marriage, nothing good ever came from middle-of-the-night phone calls. "Brent, honey, wake up." Kara was already sitting up, her blonde hair catching the moonlight streaming through our bedroom window. "That's my phone." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I watched my wife of 2 decades fumble for her iPhone on the nightstand, her movements oddly frantic for someone supposedly groggy from sleep. But Kara had always been a light sleeper, unlike me. 25 years of running warehouse operations at Millbrook Distribution had trained me to sleep through forklift alarms and loading dock chaos, but apparently not through whatever crisis was about to unfold in our modest Cape Cod home. "Hello?" Kara's voice carried that fake sweetness she reserved for people she needed something from. "Oh, hi, Janet. What's wrong?" I rolled over, trying to catch fragments of the conversation. Janet Morrison was Kara's sister, a real estate agent down in Boston who'd never met a drama she couldn't amplify. The woman could turn a hangnail into a medical emergency and a parking ticket into a federal case. Slow down," Kara whispered, glancing at me with those green eyes that had first caught my attention at a high school football game in 1985. Back then, those eyes sparkled with mischief and possibility. Now they held something else. Something I couldn't quite identify, but it made my gut clench like I'd swallowed broken glass. "When did this happen?" Kara continued, her voice rising slightly. "Oh my God, Janet. Of course I'll come down. First flight out tomorrow morning." Tomorrow morning. Just like that, my wife was planning to abandon our weekend plans, our anniversary dinner reservation at Romano's, and apparently me, all for whatever manufactured crisis her sister had cooked up this time. Kara ended the call and turned to face me, her expression a masterpiece of manufactured concern. "Brent, I'm so sorry. Janet's having a complete breakdown. Her husband left her, cleaned out their joint accounts, and she's threatening to do something stupid. I have to go to Boston." "What kind of stupid?" I asked, though part of me already knew this conversation was following a script I hadn't been given. "She's talking about pills, Brent. Suicide." Kara's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine emotion, but after 23 years of marriage, I'd learned to distinguish between my wife's real tears and her performance tears. These felt like performance tears. "Did you call the police? A suicide hotline? Her doctor?" I sat up fully now, studying Kara's face in the dim light. Because flying to Boston to play therapist seems like the least effective way to handle a mental health crisis. Kara's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "She won't talk to anyone else. She specifically asked for me. I can't abandon my sister when she needs me most." The thing about living with someone for over 2 decades is that you develop a kind of radar for their bullshit. And right now, my radar was pinging like a submarine in enemy waters. Kara was lying. Not about everything, maybe, but about something important. Something that made her willing to fabricate a family emergency at 3 in the morning. "How long will you be gone?" I asked. "I don't know. A few days, maybe a week. However long it takes to get her stabilized and back on her feet." Kara reached over and placed her hand on my chest, right over my heart. Her fingers were ice cold. "I know this ruins our anniversary plans, but Janet is family. Family. The magic word that was supposed to end all arguments and justify any inconvenience. Except Janet Morrison had never given a damn about family when it didn't serve her purposes. The woman had skipped our wedding because she had prior commitments involving a weekend in the Hamptons with some investment banker she'd been trying to impress. "I'll drive you to the airport," I offered. "No need. I'll take an Uber. You need your sleep for work tomorrow." Kara was already getting out of bed, moving toward our walk-in closet with purpose. "I should start packing now so I can catch the earliest flight." I watched my wife pull a suitcase from the top shelf of our closet. the same black Samsonite she'd used for business trips back when she worked at Hartwell Marketing, before she'd quit her job 18 months ago to focus on personal projects that never seemed to materialize into anything concrete. "Want me to help you pack?" I asked. "I've got it covered." Kara's response came too quickly, too sharp. "Go back to sleep, honey. One of us should be functional tomorrow." But sleep was the last thing on my mind as I listened to Kara moving around our bedroom, opening drawers and zipping compartments with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning this trip longer than the 30 minutes since Janet's alleged crisis call. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. I closed my eyes and pretended to drift back to sleep while my wife packed for a trip that felt less like a family emergency and more like an escape plan. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, after Kara left for her mysterious Boston rescue mission, I was going to make some phone calls of my own. Kara's Uber arrived at 6:15 a.m., right on schedule. I watched from our bedroom window as my wife of 23 years wheeled her suitcase down our front walkway, her movements crisp and purposeful in the early morning light. She looked like a woman heading off to close an important business deal, not someone rushing to prevent a family suicide. The black Toyota Camry pulled away from our house on Maple Street, carrying my wife toward whatever truth she was hiding from me. I waited until the car disappeared around the corner before reaching for my phone. Janet Morrison answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Brent! What a surprise! How are you, brother-in-law?" "I'm concerned about you, Janet. Kara told me about your crisis last night. How are you holding up?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for exactly 4 seconds. I counted them. "Crisis? What crisis?" Janet's confusion sounded genuine, which made it infinitely more valuable than any of Kara's manufactured emotions from the night before. "The breakdown, your husband leaving, the financial problems, the suicide threats. Kara caught the first flight to Boston to be with you." Another pause, shorter this time. "Brent, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Richard and I just got back from a long weekend in Vermont. We're fine. Great, actually. And I haven't talked to Kara in over a month." The bottom dropped out of my world like a trapdoor opening beneath my feet. 23 years of marriage, and my wife had just lied to my face with the kind of casual expertise that suggested this wasn't her first time. "Are you absolutely certain you didn't call Kara last night around 3 a.m.? I pressed, though I already knew the answer. "Positive. I was completely asleep by 11. Richard and I hiked 12 miles yesterday at Mount Mansfield. I couldn't have stayed awake past 11 if someone had offered me $1 million. I thanked Janet, made some excuse about crossed wires and miscommunication, and hung up. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone and trying to process the fact that my wife had just executed an elaborate deception that involved fake tears, a fabricated family emergency, and a performance worthy of a daytime soap opera. The question was why. I'd always considered myself a practical man. 25 years of warehouse management had taught me to approach problems systematically, gathering information before making decisions. So instead of immediately jumping to the most obvious conclusion, I decided to gather more information. Kara's laptop was still sitting on her desk in our home office, a converted spare bedroom where she'd supposedly been working on her mysterious personal projects. I'd never snooped through my wife's computer before, but then again, my wife had never lied about family emergencies before either. The laptop was password protected, but Kara had never been particularly creative with passwords. I tried her birthday, our anniversary, our address, and finally, our old dog's name, Rusty 2019. The desktop appeared, displaying a wallpaper photo of the two of us from our vacation in Maine last summer. I started with her email, scrolling through weeks of messages from clothing retailers, grocery stores, and subscription services. Nothing suspicious, nothing personal, nothing that suggested she was planning secret trips or maintaining relationships I didn't know about. Her browser history was equally mundane: weather forecasts, news sites, social media, online shopping. But then I noticed something interesting in her search history from 3 days ago. How to clear browser history completely, and private browsing modes explained. My wife had been covering her digital tracks. I checked her social media accounts next. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. All of them showed the carefully curated version of our life that Kara presented to the world. Anniversary dinners, weekend trips, photos of our renovated kitchen. The digital equivalent of a Christmas card, all surface shine with no depth. But social media accounts can be scrubbed and sanitized. Phone records, on the other hand, are harder to hide. I logged into our Verizon account and pulled up the detailed billing for the past 3 months. Most of Kara's calls and texts were exactly what I'd expected: her sister, her friends, local businesses, me. But there was one number that appeared with suspicious frequency, especially in the past 6 weeks. A number with a Boston area code. I wrote down the number and ran it through a reverse lookup service. The result made my hands shake. Miles Denton, real estate consultant, Boston metropolitan area. I'd never heard my wife mention anyone named Miles Denton. The phone records showed that Kara and this Miles person had exchanged over 200 text messages in the past month alone, including a 47-minute phone call at 11:30 p.m. 3 nights ago. The same night, Kara had claimed she was too tired to stay up and watch our usual Thursday night movie. I stared at the phone records until the numbers blurred together, trying to find an innocent explanation for why my wife was maintaining a secret relationship with a man in Boston. Maybe Miles was helping her plan a surprise for me. Maybe he was involved in one of her mysterious personal projects. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation that didn't involve the word affair. But then I remembered the way Kara had packed her suitcase in the dark, moving with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she needed and where she was going. I remembered the ice-cold touch of her fingers when she'd placed her hand on my chest. I remembered the performance tears and the elaborate lie about Janet's crisis. My wife wasn't in Boston to save her sister. She was in Boston to be with Miles Denton. The realization hit me like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs and leaving me gasping. 23 years of marriage, and I'd been replaced by a real estate consultant I'd never even met. I sat in Kara's desk chair, surrounded by the evidence of her deception, and felt something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. Not heartbreak, exactly. Not yet. This felt more like the moment when you realize you've been playing a game where everyone else knew the rules except you. But now I knew the rules, and I was going to learn how to play. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My assistant manager, Tommy Rodriguez, didn't ask questions when I told him I had a family emergency. The irony wasn't lost on me. Instead of heading to the warehouse, I drove to the Millbrook Public Library, a brick building that had served our small Maine town since 1923. I needed internet access that couldn't be traced back to my home computer, and the library's public terminals were perfect for the kind of research I had in mind. Miles Denton had a professional website that painted him as Boston's premier luxury real estate consultant, specializing in high-end condominiums and waterfront properties. His photo showed a man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair, expensive dental work, and the kind of confident smile that probably worked well on lonely housewives looking to upgrade their living situations. His LinkedIn profile was even more revealing. Harvard Business School, 15 years at prestigious Boston real estate firms, recently divorced, no children. The kind of man who drove a BMW, wore Italian suits, and collected expensive watches. Everything I wasn't. I'd met Kara when we were both 18, 2 kids from working-class families who thought the height of sophistication was dinner at the Olive Garden. We'd built our life together slowly, carefully, accumulating modest successes and small comforts. Our house was paid off, our cars were reliable, and we had enough in savings to weather most emergencies. But we weren't glamorous, we weren't exciting. And apparently, after 23 years, that wasn't enough for my wife anymore. I spent 2 hours researching Miles Denton, learning everything I could about the man who was currently entertaining my wife in Boston. Then I drove home and did something I'd never done in over 2 decades of marriage. I went through Kara's personal belongings. Her jewelry box yielded nothing suspicious, just the usual collection of earrings, necklaces, and the wedding ring she'd apparently forgotten to pack for her emergency trip to Boston. Her dresser drawers contained clothes, cosmetics, and a small stack of greeting cards I'd given her over the years. But tucked behind the greeting cards, wrapped in tissue paper, I found something that made me freeze. A receipt from Victoria's Secret, dated 2 weeks ago for $347 worth of lingerie. Kara hadn't worn attractive lingerie for me in over 5 years. I photographed the receipt with my phone and kept searching. In her bedside table, beneath a stack of romance novels she claimed to read for relaxation, I found a small notebook filled with Kara's handwriting. The first few pages contained grocery lists and appointment reminders. But starting about 6 weeks ago, the entries changed. M called during lunch, says he's never met anyone like me. Told B I was going shopping with Lisa, spent afternoon at M's condo instead. Amazing view of the harbor. M wants me to leave B, says we could have a real life together in Boston. Part of me wants to say yes. B suspects nothing. Sometimes I wonder if he'd even notice if I disappeared. I photographed every page, my hands shaking with rage, and something that felt like relief. At least now I knew I wasn't losing my mind. My instincts had been correct. My wife was having an affair, and she was planning to leave me for her Boston real estate consultant. The notebook entries painted a picture of a relationship that had been building for months, not weeks. Secret phone calls, clandestine meetings, and increasingly bold discussions about a future that didn't include me. Kara had been living a double life with the kind of attention to detail that would have impressed a professional spy, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. I spent the rest of the afternoon planning my next moves with the same systematic approach I used to manage inventory and logistics at the warehouse. Kara thought she was dealing with a boring, predictable husband who would never suspect her of deception. She was about to learn how wrong she was. First, I needed more information about the scope of her betrayal. The notebook suggested this affair had been going on for months, but I needed to know exactly how long and how serious it had become. Second, I needed to understand her exit strategy. Was she planning to ask for a divorce? Or was she simply going to disappear one day and leave me to figure it out? Third, and most importantly, I needed to decide what I was going to do with the information I'd gathered. 23 years of marriage doesn't end without consequences. Kara had invested decades in building our life together, and if she wanted to walk away from that investment, she was going to pay a price. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I wasn't going to make it cheap for her. And I wasn't going to let her control the narrative when everything finally came to light. As the sun set over our quiet neighborhood, I sat in my kitchen and made a list of everyone who would need to know the truth about my wife's secret life. Our families, our friends, our financial advisors, our insurance agents. Kara had spent months planning her escape from our marriage. Now it was my turn to make some plans. The next morning, I drove to Portland and visited a private investigator named Sarah Chen, whose office occupied the second floor of a converted warehouse in the Arts District. Chen came highly recommended by my lawyer's secretary, who'd whispered her name during a conversation about discreet personal matters. Sarah Chen was nothing like the private investigators you see in movies. No trench coat, no cigarettes, no world-weary cynicism. She was a former Portland police detective in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen every variety of human stupidity and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Adultery investigation," she said, reviewing the notes I'd provided. "How long do you suspect this has been going on?" "At least 3 months, possibly longer. My wife is currently in Boston with him, supposedly visiting her sister for a family emergency." Chen nodded, making additional notes on a yellow legal pad. Do you want photographic evidence of the affair, or are you more interested in financial records and communication logs? Everything. I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with before I decide how to proceed. Smart approach. Most people want to confront immediately and end up destroying their leverage. Chen quoted her daily rate and estimated timeline. I can have preliminary results within 48 hours, complete documentation within a week. I wrote her a check and drove home, feeling like I'd crossed some invisible line between suspicion and action. There would be no going back now, no pretending I didn't know what I knew, no comfortable delusions about the state of my marriage. That evening, Kara called from Boston. "How's Janet doing?" I asked, settling into my recliner with a beer and a notepad. "Better today. She's agreed to see a therapist, which is a huge step forward." Kara's voice carried that same artificial sweetness I'd noticed during her fake crisis call. "I think I'll need to stay through the weekend, maybe into next week." "That's very generous of you. I know Janet appreciates having you there." "She does. She keeps saying I'm the only family member who really understands her situation." The lies rolled off my wife's tongue like water off a duck's back. 23 years together, and I was apparently married to a world-class actress. "Are you staying at Janet's apartment?" I asked. A pause. Just a heartbeat, but enough to confirm what I already suspected. "Yes, of course. Where else would I stay?" "Just wondering. I know her place is pretty small for 2 people. "We're managing fine. Listen, honey, I should go. Janet needs help with some paperwork for her divorce attorney." More lies, delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never been caught. "Give Janet my best," I said. "Tell her I'm thinking about her during this difficult time." "I will. Love you, Brent." "Love you too, Kara." I hung up and immediately called Janet Morrison in Boston. "Brent, twice in 1 week. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday. Has Kara been in touch since then?" "No, not a word. Should she have been?" "Just curious. She mentioned she might call to clarify the misunderstanding about your crisis." Janet laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "What crisis? Richard and I are having the best week we've had in months. We're actually talking about taking another long weekend next month, maybe hitting the White Mountains this time." I thanked Janet again and hung up, then made detailed notes about both conversations. Timestamps, exact quotes, contradictions between Kara's story and Janet's reality. My wife was building an elaborate fiction, and I was documenting every lie. The next day brought a call from Sarah Chen. "I've got your preliminary results," she said. "Can you come in this afternoon?" Chen's office felt different the second time, less like a business meeting and more like a war room. She'd spread photographs and documents across her desk like a general planning a campaign. "Your wife is staying at the Marriott Harborview in downtown Boston," Chen began, sliding a hotel receipt across the desk. "Room 1247, registered under her own name. She checked in Tuesday morning, about 3 hours after her flight landed." "Is she alone?" Chen placed a series of photographs on the desk. They showed Kara and a man I recognized from his website photos entering the hotel together, holding hands, kissing in the lobby like teenagers. "Miles Denton," Chen confirmed. "They've been practically inseparable since she arrived. Dinner at expensive restaurants, shopping on Newberry Street, long walks along the harbor. They're not exactly trying to hide their relationship." I studied the photographs, feeling strangely detached from the images of my wife with another man. It was like looking at pictures of strangers, people whose lives had nothing to do with mine. "What about financial records?" Chen produced bank statements and credit card records. "This is where it gets interesting. Your wife has been making regular cash withdrawals for the past 4 months, always in amounts just under the reporting threshold. She's also opened a new credit card account that you're not listed on." "How much money are we talking about?" "Approximately $12,000 in cash withdrawals, plus another $8,000 in charges on the new credit card. Hotel rooms, restaurants, clothing, jewelry. She's been financing this affair with your joint savings account. The numbers hit me like physical blows. $20,000 of our money spent on another man. $20,000 that should have been funding our retirement, paying down our mortgage, or sitting in our emergency fund. Instead, it had been funding my wife's escape plan. There's more, Chen continued. I ran a background check on Miles Denton. He's not quite the successful businessman he pretends to be. He's been through 2 bankruptcies in the past decade, owes back taxes to the IRS, and his real estate license was suspended last year for ethics violations. What kind of ethics violations? Misrepresenting property values to secure larger commissions. Basically, he's a con artist who specializes in luxury real estate. The irony was perfect. My wife was having an affair with a man who made his living by lying to people about the value of their most important investments. I need everything documented, I told Chen. Every photograph, every receipt, every financial record. I want a complete picture of what my wife has been doing with our money and our marriage. Chen nodded. I'll have the full report ready by Friday, but I have to ask, what are you planning to do with this information? I looked at the photographs of Kara and Miles, at the evidence of months of deception and financial betrayal, at the ruins of a marriage I'd thought was solid and permanent. I'm going to make sure my wife understands the true cost of her choices, I said. Kara returned from Boston on Sunday evening, wheeling the same black suitcase through our front door with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just enjoyed a particularly successful vacation. How's Janet? I asked from my position on the living room couch, where I'd been reading a book and waiting for my wife to come home from her affair. Much better. The therapy sessions really helped, and she's starting to see her situation more clearly. Kara set down her suitcase and leaned over to kiss my cheek. She smelled like expensive perfume and another man's cologne. I think she's going to be fine. That's wonderful news. I'm sure it was difficult for both of you. It was, but family is family. You do what you have to do. Kara straightened up and stretched, a gesture that seemed calculated to display the new lingerie I could see through her blouse. I'm exhausted. I think I'll take a hot bath and go to bed early. Good idea. You've had a stressful week. I watched my wife head upstairs, listened to the sound of running water as she filled our bathtub, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. This was the woman I'd married, the person I'd planned to spend the rest of my life with, and she'd just lied to my face with the casual ease of someone ordering coffee. 23 years of marriage, and it had all been reduced to performance art. I waited until I heard Kara get into the bath, then quietly climbed the stairs and knocked on the bathroom door. Kara, can we talk? Can it wait? I just got in. It's important. A pause, then the sound of water sloshing. Come in. My wife was lying in our bathtub, surrounded by bubbles and candles, looking like a woman without a care in the world. The scene would have been romantic if I hadn't known she'd spent the past week in bed with another man. I've been thinking about your sister's situation, I began, settling onto the closed toilet seat. About marriage and trust and what happens when people stop being honest with each other. Kara's eyes sharpened slightly, but her voice remained casual. What about it? I was wondering how someone gets to the point where they can lie to their spouse about something as serious as a family emergency. What kind of person does that? I don't understand what you're asking. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery, scrolling to the images Sarah Chen had provided. I'm asking about this. I held up the phone, showing Kara a photograph of herself and Miles Denton kissing in the lobby of the Marriott Harbor View. The color drained from my wife's face like water from a broken dam. She sat up in the bathtub, bubbles sliding off her shoulders, staring at the phone screen with the expression of someone who'd just realized they'd been caught in a lie that couldn't be explained away. Brent, I can explain. Can you? because I'm really curious to hear how you explain spending our money on hotel rooms and expensive dinners while lying to me about family emergencies." Kara's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For the first time in months, she seemed to be at a loss for words. "How long?" I asked. "How long what?" "How long have you been sleeping with Miles Denton?" The profanity hung in the air between us like a slap. I'd never spoken to my wife that way before, never used that tone or those words. But then again, my wife had never betrayed 23 years of marriage before. "4 months," she whispered. "4 months of lying to me. 4 months of stealing our money to finance your affair. 4 months of planning your exit strategy while pretending to be my loving wife." Tears began streaming down Kara's face, but they looked different from her performance tears. These seemed real, born from genuine fear rather than manufactured emotion. "I never meant for it to happen," she said. "Miles and I met at a coffee shop in Portland. We started talking, and he was so interesting, so different from anyone I'd ever met. He made me feel alive again, like I was more than just a warehouse supervisor's wife in a hopeless town. So you decided to become an adulterer instead." "It wasn't like that. We fell in love, Brent. Real love, the kind of passionate, consuming love that changes everything. I know it's hard to understand, but when you meet your soulmate, you can't just ignore it." I stared at my wife, sitting naked in our bathtub, trying to justify 4 months of deception and betrayal with romantic cliches about soulmates and passion. "Your soulmate is a con artist," I said. "Miles Denton has been through 2 bankruptcies, owes back taxes, and had his real estate license suspended for fraud. He's not a successful businessman, Kara. He's a professional liar who specializes in taking advantage of lonely women." The words hit my wife like physical blows. She wrapped her arms around her knees, suddenly looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. "That's not true. I have the documentation, background checks, financial records, legal filings. Your soulmate is using you the same way he's used other women. The only difference is that you're paying for the privilege." Kara began sobbing, great heaving cries that echoed off the bathroom tiles. "You don't understand. Miles loves me. He wants to marry me. We have plans." "What kind of plans?" "He's buying a condo in Back Bay. We're going to live there together, start a new life. He says I deserve better than this place, better than a marriage that stopped growing years ago." I felt something break inside my chest, not my heart exactly, but something deeper and more fundamental. The foundation of everything I'd believed about my life, my marriage, my future. "When were you planning to tell me about these plans?" Kara looked up at me through her tears, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the 18-year-old girl I'd fallen in love with at a high school football game 30 years ago. "I was going to ask for a divorce next month," she whispered. "Miles says his lawyer can make it quick and clean, no contest. We could both move on with our lives." Quick and clean, how thoughtful of him. I stood up and looked down at my wife, this woman who'd shared my bed for over 2 decades, while planning to abandon our marriage for a man she'd known for 4 months. "Get out of my house," I said. "What?" "Get out of my house. Tonight. Pack your things and leave." "Brent, please. Can't we talk about this like adults? Can't we figure out a way to end this marriage with some dignity?" I walked to the bathroom door, then turned back to face her one last time. "You lost the right to dignity when you started lying to me about family emergencies. You lost the right to adult conversations when you started stealing our money to pay for hotel rooms. And you lost the right to a quick, clean divorce when you decided to plan your exit strategy with another man's lawyer." I left my wife sitting in the bathtub and went downstairs to begin planning the most important campaign of my life. Kara wanted a divorce. I was going to give her one she'd never forget. Kara left that night, throwing clothes into garbage bags while crying and pleading for another chance to explain. I watched from our bedroom doorway as she packed, noting that she took the new lingerie, but left behind her wedding ring. "Where will you go?" I asked as she dragged her belongings toward the front door. "Miles has a friend with a spare room in Cambridge, just temporarily until we figure things out." How romantic. Nothing says true love like crashing on someone's couch. Kara stopped at the threshold and turned to face me one last time. "I know you hate me right now, and I understand why. But someday, I hope you'll realize that this is better for both of us. We've been living like roommates for years, going through the motions of a marriage that faded a long time ago. Our marriage faded when you decided to start sleeping with another man. Everything before that was just life." She flinched at my words, but didn't argue. Maybe because she finally understood that her time for explanations and justifications had run out. After Kara left, I sat in my kitchen and made a list of phone calls I needed to make. Our families, our friends, our financial advisors, our insurance agents. Everyone who would need to know that my wife had decided to end our 23-year marriage for a con artist she'd met in a coffee shop. I started with my brother Danny, a Massachusetts state trooper who'd never particularly liked Kara, but had been too polite to say so. "Jesus, Brent, I'm sorry, man. What do you need?" "Legal advice mostly, and maybe some information about Miles Denton's background that might not show up in a standard background check. I'll make some calls. Guys like that usually have longer histories than what shows up in public records." Next, I called Kara's parents in Florida. Her mother cried when I explained the situation, but her father's response was more direct. "That snake better hope I never meet him in person," he said, "and Kara better hope she comes to her senses before she destroys her entire life over some midlife crisis bullshit." I spent the next 3 hours making similar calls, explaining the same story, answering the same shocked questions. By the time I finished, half of New England knew that Kara Alden had abandoned her marriage for a con artist from Boston. But phone calls were just the beginning. The next morning, I drove to the office of Patricia Kellerman, the most aggressive divorce attorney in Cumberland County. Kellerman had a reputation for scorched earth tactics and an impressive track record of protecting her clients' financial interests. "Adultery, financial misconduct, and abandonment," she said, reviewing the evidence Sarah Chen had compiled. "This is going to be expensive for your wife." "How expensive?" "Maine is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still impact property division and alimony determinations. Given the financial misconduct and the fact that she abandoned the marriage, I'd estimate she'll be entitled to maybe 30% of your joint assets." "What about the money she spent on her affair?" "That's considered dissipation of marital assets. She'll have to reimburse the joint estate for every penny she spent on hotel rooms, dinners, and gifts for her boyfriend, with interest." I signed a retainer agreement and authorized Kellerman to begin divorce proceedings immediately. No counseling, no trial separation, no attempt at reconciliation. Kara had made her choice, and now she was going to live with the consequences. But legal action was only part of my plan. That afternoon, I created a Facebook post that included several of Sarah Chen's photographs and a detailed explanation of my wife's 4-month affair. I tagged everyone we knew, including Kara's family, her friends, and her former co-workers. The post went viral within hours. Comments poured in from people expressing shock, sympathy, and outrage. Several of Kara's friends admitted they'd suspected something was wrong, but hadn't wanted to interfere. Her former boss from Hartwell Marketing commented that she was disappointed but not surprised by Kara's choices. But the most satisfying response came from Miles Denton himself, who apparently saw the post when one of Kara's friends shared it. He sent me a private message that evening. "Mr. Alden, I think there's been a misunderstanding about my relationship with your wife. Kara told me you were already separated and planning to divorce. I would never have pursued a relationship with a married woman if I'd known the truth." I screenshot the message and forwarded it to Kara's phone with a simple note. "Looks like your soulmate is having second thoughts." She called me 20 minutes later, sobbing hysterically. How could you do this to me? How could you destroy my reputation, my relationships, my entire life over a mistake? The same way you destroyed our marriage over a con artist. The same way you stole our money to finance your affair. The same way you lied to me for 4 months while planning to abandon everything we'd built together. Miles broke up with me. He says he can't handle the drama, that he needs to focus on rebuilding his career. 23 years of marriage, and you destroyed it all in one day. I didn't destroy our marriage, Kara. You did that when you decided Miles Denton was more important than the vows you made to me. She hung up, but not before I heard her crying in a way that suggested she was finally beginning to understand the true cost of her choices. Over the next week, the consequences of Kara's affair continued to unfold like dominoes falling in a carefully planned sequence. Her friends stopped returning her calls. Her family expressed disappointment and embarrassment. Her former co-workers shared the story throughout Portland's business community, effectively blacklisting her from future employment opportunities. Miles Denton, true to his nature as a con artist, disappeared entirely. His phone went straight to voicemail, his social media accounts were deleted, and his business website went offline. Kara's soulmate had vanished like smoke the moment her situation became inconvenient for him. But the most satisfying development came from my brother Danny, who called with information about Miles's background that hadn't appeared in Sarah Chen's investigation. Your wife's boyfriend has been running this same scam for years, Danny explained. He targets married women in their late 30s and early 40s, usually middle-class housewives who are feeling unfulfilled. He presents himself as a successful businessman, sweeps them off their feet with expensive dates and romantic gestures, then convinces them to leave their husbands and finance his lifestyle. How many women? At least 6 that we can document, probably more. He's been married 3 times himself, always to women who discovered his financial problems after it was too late. The guy's a professional predator. I thought about Kara, sitting in some stranger's spare room in Cambridge, crying over a man who'd never loved her and had probably forgotten her name the moment she stopped being useful to him. 23 years of marriage, destroyed for a 4-month fantasy with a professional liar. The divorce papers were served the following Monday. Kellerman had included demands for full restitution of the money Kara had spent on her affair, plus attorney fees, plus a property division that left her with almost nothing. Kara called me that evening, her voice small and defeated. Brent, please. I know I made mistakes, but this is too much. Your lawyer wants everything. The house, the cars, the savings accounts, even my grandmother's jewelry. I'll have nothing left. You should have thought about that before you decided to sleep with a con artist. I'm begging you. I'll do anything to make this right. I'll pay back every penny I spent. I'll agree to counseling. I'll sign any agreement you want. Just please don't destroy me completely. I looked around the house we'd shared for 15 years, at the furniture we'd chosen together, the photographs of happier times, the accumulated debris of a marriage that had once meant everything to both of us. You destroyed yourself, Kara. I'm just making sure you pay the bill. She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke in a voice I barely recognized. I loved you once. I know you don't believe that now, but I did love you. We had good years together. We did, I agreed. But you traded those good years for 4 months with a man who never gave a damn about you. That was your choice, and now you get to live with the consequences. I hung up and poured myself a drink, then sat in my empty house and contemplated the ruins of everything I'd once believed about love, marriage, and the woman I'd planned to spend the rest of my life with. Kara had wanted a quick, clean divorce. Instead, she got exactly what she deserved.